Yeah, so what I wanted to talk about with you today was what I wanted to talk about you today was about the West Bank. Yeah, I've worn that before, Magic. um, I wanted to talk about this because we are um, in a stage of Israel's genocide against Palestinians where the lines are starting to blur. And someone mentioned in the beginning, who was it? Was it SV5679? Said, can you expand on what you said in your previous video about ethnic cleansing? Not ethnic cleansing not being a crime, just a term invented by Serbia to avoid their actions being called genocide. And yes, it's more or less what I want to talk about today. So you read my mind. So that's really cool. So what I um what I want to discuss is this concept um, that we have siloed in. There's a genocide in Gaza, and there's something else happening in the West Bank, usually referred to as ethnic cleansing. Um, and I want to push back on that a little bit because you'll remember that I wrote an article on that's called "How to Hide a Genocide." That's on the history of how the concept of genocide has been shrunk, narrowed through the times, through the decades. Um, when compared to Raphael Lemkin's original, um, let's say, original concept of genocide. So I wanted to explain what's happened and why and when can ethnic cleansing become in itself genocide and when it is something different, right? Because one key aspect of all of this is that mass deportations are not per se genocidal, right? If Trump tomorrow says we're going to deport every single Latin American from the United States, that is not per se, on its own merits, genocidal, right? That is not, um, uh, you're not necessarily eliminating that group with the intent to destroy it. You're just doing a bunch of administrative procedures to deport a lot of people, but the intent to destroy might not be there, right? But if the United States starts making life impossible for Latin Americans in the United States, or for and yeah, Latin Americans in the United States, in the sense that you start detaining them, in the sense that you start like banning them from public institutions, banning them from public services, eventually you start getting to this realm of like, okay, is this just oh hey Magic Carlos, thank you so much for donating 100 bits. Um, eventually you start to get into this idea, this notion of, is this ethnic cleansing a sign that something else is happening? Oh, thank you, Economist. I appreciate that. Oh, okay, so the hype train is here. Okay, thank you so much. Sorry, I had run out of bits. um, okay, so, well, there you go. 4 minutes and 45 seconds, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. Thanks, Magic. Um, yeah, um, so where was I? So okay, so yeah, so what is the difference between ethnic cleansing and genocide? Particularly because like ethnic cleansing is not a different crime than genocide. Ethnic cleansing is a set of behaviors, a set of conducts. Oh, hey Odara, thank you so much. I appreciate that. 62%, that's awesome. Oh, Iconoclast, thank you so much again. Hey, you guys, you're being very generous. I appreciate that. Um, ASV, don't worry. It's my pleasure to do these things. Guys, I really appreciate what you're doing. So thank you so much. Here's to better cameras. So here's the thing. We have determined that we have ethnic cleansing in the West Bank and genocide in Gaza, and that's it. It's been siloed like that. Um, and so I wanted to explore that a little bit. Oh, thank you, Magic. Thanks again. I wanted to explore that a little bit and see where we land on the when can we say that ethnic cleansing becomes genocide? This is a question that actually James O'Brien asked me when I was in his show. When is ethnic cleansing genocide? And I didn't have enough time to expand, so maybe we can do that now. Okay, so let's get started. To start, I wanted to show you more or less what's been going on in the West Bank. Okay, so I prepared this video. I had this video here to share with you guys about the recent attacks and campaigns of ethnic cleansing that are happening in the West Bank. Okay, the train is not over. No, it's still there. It's at 80%, guys. So Jaratov, this is I sort of agree with you, and it'll become clearer as we go forward. I sort of agree with you that it is, to me, the invention of the category of ethnic cleansing is part of this broader process of narrowing down the definition of genocide. But there are arguments there to be made about this distinction. So let's see. Let me get there. Let me make the argument, then you'll see how this works. But I should warn you from the beginning that yes, I tend to agree with you that ethnic cleansing sounds pretty genocidal to me very often, but that is not necessarily the mainstream majoritarian position. Oh, Iconoclast, thank you so much for the 100 bits again. We're at 87%, guys. You're doing it. You have 2 minutes. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, so let's watch the video. Hold on. Where's the video? Here's the video.
Nothing much of any use is left. We were told Israeli settlers stole the computers from the village school, then wrecked the place. The head teacher's office, leaving the Star of David in case anyone still doesn't get the message. The mosque, burned out, its roof wrecked. Sure, the international community was watching. Why, there's a sign to prove it. The British, Spanish, EU and the rest. Fat lot of good it did now in the ghost village, which is Al Mujarat. Last week they came and they followed the pattern that we've seen across the Jordan Valley. Step 1, deprive the Palestinian villagers of their livelihood by stealing their sheep. No need for disguise or haste. Police, army, no problem. Step 2, deprive the Palestinians of their homes and thus their land. They're armed. But shouting abuse is enough. The Palestinian villagers know they are helpless. It's morning now, broad daylight, time for the settlers to put up a tent. A shady HQ for evicting an entire village. They can now get comfortable, stand and watch as the Palestinians salvage whatever they can before leaving. Oh, and by now the Israeli army has arrived. They stand alongside the settlers and watch it all too. Or even take a seat, relax with the settlers and watch as the Palestinians are forced to dismantle their lives. The Palestinians know only too well any attempt at resistance now will mean being arrested or beaten or shot. And overseen, literally, by the State of Israel, another Palestinian family drives off. Livelihood, home and land stolen.
See, this is done with the complete support of the Israeli state. We're filming, we're seeing the forced deportation, eviction of a family from their land. Okay, let's go on. Sorry, I'm just very mad at this.
So Alia and her family now camped out in another village. They could stay here for just a few days, then have to move on again.
There were dozens, and having the army as their shield, they attacked the community, confiscating sheep and forcing people to leave.
One of the attacks.
All of our dreams, all of our memories are in that house. Even today we cry over that house. We still want to go back to it.
Whilst the world attention has focused on Gaza, these evictions have exploded.
I mean, they're not really evictions, right? An eviction implies process, implies procedure, implies that the state is coming with a warrant and is like expelling you from your home. This is a guy with a machine gun, supported by an army that is supported by the United States of America, the biggest military power in the world, forcing people to flee from their homes. Eviction just doesn't quite put it.
Travel across the Jordan Valley and you're in a landscape of wrecked, deserted Palestinian settlements and farms. A few miles away and we reach Ras Al Ain. It's one of the last Palestinian villages standing around here. But just 700 meters away, a warning looms over the village. Another illegal settler outpost built a few months back to send a message to Ras Al Ain. We're coming for you next. Why can people go to somebody else's village, smash up their homes, terrorize them and push them out with, your word, impunity?
Because of Jewish supremacy, I'm sorry to say. Because this is a country that is based on Jewish supremacy, and especially here in the occupied territories.
And you see how important it is? This is a Jewish Israeli putting their bodies in the line to protect Palestinians. Like, this is so important to see and so important to support, right? Because we see these polls that say like 87% of the population is in favor of like evicting or like killing Palestinians in Gaza, but these people also exist, and they are aware of the fact that they are a Jewish supremacist society.
The territory was occupied after 1967. This is the Wild West. I mean, so they simply do whatever they wish.
Anat Matar, one of a group of Israeli campaigners working here in shifts to try and protect the village from the settlers. But they have already swaggered into this very room recently, just to let everyone know they can do what they want, when they want. So they play, overlooked by the settler outpost, its appearance signalling the coming end of life as these children know it.
In the past, if the settler heard you talking to the police complaining about damage to your crops, olives, wheat or trees, he would leave immediately. But now, no. The settler remains right in your house. The police show up, shake his hand, hug him, congratulate him, pat him on the back. The army does the same.
Salam's misfortune, owning the nearest house to the illegal Israeli settler outpost. He talks of the Nakba, the forced Palestinian expulsions by Israel in 1948, and now this.
There will be no Nakba here like before. We die here. There's no room for anything else. We will not leave again. Here we die. That's the only path we have left.
So, time then to hear what the settlers have got to say. We're going to walk up the hill and talk to the settlers who have, as you'll have gathered, a well-deserved reputation for...
I mean, the concept of the settlers, like the calling them the settlers, this is a terrorist organization. Let's put it plainly. This is a group of people that are organized and armed. It's an organized armed group that has as its purpose terrorizing the civilian population for a political objective. This is a terrorist organization. They're talking to terrorists.
For violence and aggression, but they might just want to say their piece. Let's see. They come roaring down, clock our camera, and head back to the outpost. So we walked on, and back they came. Get out of here, he said. This is our territory. Go away. I see you coming to our territory. Get back in your taxi and go back to where you came from.
Our territory.
And as we'd filmed with Alia's expelled family, a chance encounter, the MP Ofer Kassif turned up. He's currently banned from Parliament for calling Israel's war in Gaza genocide. So, if Gaza's genocide, what's this?
In 2 words, ethnic cleansing. There's no other way to describe it. This fascist government of Israel has been carrying out atrocities and war crimes and crimes against humanity since day one. And in the West Bank, like here in Maharajat, or the refugees of Maharajat...
Which they deny, of course.
Obviously, they deny many other things. They deny there's a genocide going on in Gaza.
But visit Parliament and you see why the settlers feel above the law.
So that's an interesting conversation that I want to stay with. This is this idea that Gaza is a genocide and the West Bank is ethnic cleansing. Okay, stay with that binary for a second.
The government's very existence depends on support from ultra-nationalist settler MPs. So they often get what they want, and that means allowing the settlers to carry on.
Let's talk about the West Bank finally.
What is the West Bank, though?
The West Bank.
What is
the,
it?
the occupied territories.
I don't know of such thing.
Well, I'm sure you know what we're talking about. What can Israel do to stop settlers attacking Palestinians in their villages and taking their land?
That's a very bizarre question.
No, it's
because
not.
crime you have everywhere in the world. You're not asking the same question about England.
People aren't stealing land and attacking villages.
No, we're not stealing any land.
Aren't you?
No, we are not. Jews are the rightful people of this land.
And with fierce support also from some cabinet members, the expulsions are unleashed, leaving the West Bank increasingly studded with silent, emptied, ruined villages. And as if to underline the problem of settler violence in the West Bank, just this afternoon a young man, 23-year-old Saif Muslat, beaten to death by settlers in an altercation in a village just north of Ramallah. Back to our story, though, in that very village where we were filming Ras Al Ain, have a look at this. This was today, just 24 hours after we left the village. Settlers coming in on horseback to intimidate the villagers, send the message, we're here, we're in charge, it ain't going to be your village for much longer. Other images now. This was the actual farm that we filmed on in the report you've just seen. They warned us the settlers would come back. Sure enough, they came back, using the place as their fields with their flocks of sheep, coming in there, sitting down nonchalantly, not bothered at all, quite happy to be filmed by the peace campaigners, Israeli peace campaigners, trying to keep a lid on this situation. But it simply goes to show that that village of Ras Al Ain, which we said was under threat, is very much under threat. Precious little the state of Israel is doing, frankly, to stop any of this. Precious little the wider world, including the UK, doing anything either. Back to you.
See, okay, so bear with me for a second, okay? First of all, what's going on in the West Bank is a horrendous atrocity. It is very cruel. And it is being carried out not just by settlers, as the video shows. It is being carried out with the support of the state. If the state is directly propping up these communities and sending ministers and there is complicity, right? That's undeniable. So we should not silo what Israel is doing in Gaza from what it is doing in the West Bank. Gaza and the West Bank, as much as Israel hates it, are a singular unit under international law. They are not separate entities. They are the Palestinian occupied territory, not territories, territory, singular. It's one single Palestinian territory that is what remains from what is left after Israel seceded from the mandate of Palestine, right? So let me look for a second at what Raphael Lemkin called genocide. Okay, Raphael Lemkin, famously the Jewish scholar who invented the term genocide, right? So I have here Axis rule in occupied Europe. Oh, what happened? Okay, here it is. Axis rule in occupied Europe is I wonder if I can, yeah, close sidebar. It's the book in which he defined genocide, chapter 9, as you can see here, right? So, says here, new conceptions require new terms. By genocide, we mean the destruction of a nation or of an ethnic group. This new word, coined by the author to denote an old practice in its modern development, is made from the ancient Greek word genos, race, tribe, and the Latin side, killing, side, right, killing, thus corresponding in its formation to such words as tyrannicide, homicide, infanticide, etc. Generally speaking, genocide does not necessarily mean the immediate destruction of a nation, except when accomplished by mass killings of all members of a nation. Generally speaking, genocide does not necessarily mean the immediate destruction of a nation, except when committed by killing. So there is this notion that all genocides need to look like the Holocaust. Lemkin himself is telling you in It's just 41, I think. No, maybe a little bit later. Um, I don't remember what year this is, but he's telling you, no, it doesn't. Right? It doesn't need to take the form of mass killing. It is intended rather to signify a coordinated plan of different actions aiming at the destruction of essential foundations of the life of national groups with the aim of annihilating the groups themselves. The objectives of such a plan would be disintegration of the political and social institutions of culture, language, national feelings, religion, and the economic existence of national groups, and the destruction of the personal security, liberty, health, dignity, and even the lives, right, of the individuals belonging to such groups. Genocide is directed against the national group as an entity, and the actions involved are directed against individuals, not in their individual capacity, but as members of the national group. The following illustration will suffice. The confiscation of property of nationals of an occupied area. Look at the language, right? The language is so interesting when seen in the context of Israel-Palestine. The confiscation of property of nationals of an occupied area, so think a Palestinian and their home, as a deprivation of their individual property rights, right? The confiscation of property of nationals of an occupied area on the grounds that they have left the country may be considered simply as a deprivation of their individual property rights. They have left the country. So this would refer to the practice of like evicting Jewish people in the Holocaust and then confiscating their property. But this is also what happens in Palestine with the absentee property law, right? People who left Israel as a result of the Nakba, and people who left their homes and then moved to another city within Israel, didn't even leave Israel, didn't become refugees, they also like had their property confiscated, right? Their homes were declared absentee property. And so their homes were given to Jewish residents, even when they are Palestinian citizens of Israel. It is that crazy. So, the confiscation of property of nationals of an occupied area on the grounds that they have left the country may be considered simply as a deprivation of their individual property rights. However, if the confiscations are ordered against individuals solely because they are Poles, Jews, or Czechs, then the same confiscations tend in effect to weaken the national entities of which those persons are members. Right? So if you're removing the property of Palestinians because they are Palestinians, because you want to take over the land, then that confiscation of property is not just an affectation of their property right, it is an affectation of the entire national right to exist. Right? So genocide, says Lemkin, has two phases. One, destruction of the national pattern of the oppressed group. The other, the imposition of the national pattern of the oppressor. This imposition in turn may be made upon the oppressed population, which is allowed to remain, or upon the territory alone, after removal of the population and the colonization of the area by the oppressor's own nationals. Right? So you can commit genocide against the people as a group or as the territory after you remove the people, right? Denationalization was the word used in the past to describe the destruction of national pattern. The author believes, however, that this word is inadequate because one, it does not connote the destruction of the biological structure, the actual, killing, like lack of people. Two, in connoting the destruction of the national pattern, it does not connote the imposition of the national pattern of the oppressor, just destroying, not replacing. And three, denationalization is used by some authors to mean only deprivation of citizenship. Right? So here's the thing. When you look at the concept of ethnic cleansing from the perspective of what Raphael Lemkin is saying here, does it constitute genocide to Raphael Lemkin? And I think the obvious conclusion from this text is yes. Right? For Raphael Lemkin, if you are destroying the national pattern of a group to such a degree so that they are no longer able to survive in that place because you have made it impossible for them to do so, and they end up leaving, they end up being ethnically cleansed from the area, you destroyed the group, not by killing them, but by destroying what made them the group. Right? So the general idea was, will Jewish people be able to survive as a group in Germany? Will German Jews be able to exist as a group? If the conclusion to that answer was no, because of the policies that the German state was, advancing at the time, then the response of Lemkin would be, then that is genocide. Right? It doesn't really matter if it's done through ethnic cleansing. It doesn't really matter if it's done through the final solution and killing of every single Jewish person. It doesn't matter if it's done through deportations or through confiscation. Confiscation of property alone can be genocidal, according to Lemkin. And there's another part where he talks about starvation as genocide. Starving Jewish people in the Warsaw Ghetto, for example, was seen by Lemkin as genocidal. And so when you read Lemkin's work, yes, ethnic cleansing is genocidal, as per Lemkin's work. And yet, when the Genocide Convention was regulated, when the Genocide Convention was created, so when we translated genocide from text to actual policy, to actual law, something got lost in the way. This is what I argue about in my article that I wrote a few months back in the Journal of Genocide Research. Something happened to genocide when it was legislated, and the definition was not narrow. The interpretation of the definition was narrowed. Right? The definition is just let's put the definition of genocide here. Definition is, in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A, killing members of the group. B, causing serious bodily or mental harm. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction, in whole or in part. D, imposing measures intended to prevent birth. And E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Nothing in this definition contradicts that idea that destroying the national pattern of another group by removing the population from that group would be a different kind of crime, right? So because ethnic cleansing could very clearly end up in section C, right? You are creating conditions of life that would bring about the physical destruction of the group, not necessarily through killing, but through their ethnic cleansing. So nothing in the definition says to me ethnic cleansing is a different thing than genocide, right? Does that mean that every single ethnic cleansing is a genocide? No, not necessarily, because not every single ethnic cleansing will be done with the intention to destroy the group. Like we were talking about, a process of mass deportations in the United States, right? Even if the objective is to remove Latinos from the United States, the process would not be one of let's destroy Latin Americans in the United States as a group. But the lines begin to blur, because then you could argue that you want to get rid of everyone. But the question is, are you subjecting Latin Americans to conditions of life that will bring about their destruction, or are you just engaging in forcible transfers? Are you just engaging in deportations? Are you just engaging in a mass expulsion, right? And why is it that these lines get blurred? Because population transfer is something that the Allies after World War II did in Europe. So they transferred a lot of Germans out of Poland and Czech Republic, ethnic Germans, to Germany as policy. And so if the European countries were doing that, then that can't be genocide, because the Allies can't possibly be committing genocide after winning World War II, right? And so this starts this process where whenever a process is done that creates a massive injustice, in this case, moving people out of a country into another country by force, it is an injustice. It can't be genocidal. So let's hedge the definition of genocide so that this isn't included. And so, for example, there's a famous moment in the negotiation of the Genocide Convention where Syria, the representative of Syria, tries to pass an amendment that would basically say that the Nakba was a genocide. They said, like, submitting a population to conditions that make them flee because otherwise they will be mistreated, they will be attacked, it should be genocide. And that specific text was removed from the definition of genocide. Not removed, sorry, was not incorporated as element F of the definition of genocide. It was supposed to be F when a population is forced to flee so that they don't incur in harm. We didn't get an F. And so this was done out of fear that, well, but the Allies have sort of like expelled Germans from non-German places and sent them to Germany. If that is genocide, then the Allies will be genocidal, and they can't possibly be genocidal, right? So this led to confusion as to, like, is this aspect of Axis rule that talks about that genocide can be imposed upon the territory, not just the people, is this actual genocide as per the regulation of the Genocide Convention here in this definition? And this is where it starts to get complicated, because in the where is it here? I was supposed to have this ready. Sorry, guys. Okay. In the case of Croatia, Croatia v. Serbia at the ICJ, the International Court of Justice had to address whether what Serbia was doing was a genocide or not, or whether it was just, as the Serbians were saying, just ethnic cleansing. The objective of the Serbians was, we want to create a Serbian Serbia. So we can't have Croats in Serbia. So we need to remove all the Serbians, all the non-Serbians. And so there is a famous phrase by William Shabas, who's a scholar of genocide. He says that ethnic cleansing can lead to genocide. And so genocide is often the last resort of a frustrated ethnic cleanser. That's his quote. So he says, like, ethnic cleansing is separate from genocide, but it is adjacent to genocide, because sometimes you end up genociding when you can't ethnically cleanse, right? Which is, the argument is that that's what happened in the Holocaust as well, right? For example, the Madagascar plan, there was the forced deportations of Jews to Poland, and eventually that ended up in the genocide of the Holocaust as we know it, with the gas chambers and all of that, killing 6 million Jews. So ethnic cleansing would be a policy that, if you get frustrated because you can't carry out, you become genocidal. But per se, on its own, it wouldn't be genocide. And this is something that the International Court of Justice had to address, right? Is this true? When the Serbians say, no, we're not genociding, we're just ethnically cleansing, is this true? What is the connection between the two terms, right? So the court says deliberate infliction on the group of conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part within the meaning of Article 2C of the Convention. So this one here, right, covers methods of physical destruction other than killing, whereby the perpetrator ultimately seeks the death of the members of the group. See, just here, that's not really what Lemkin meant, right? Lemkin was talking about how genocide is not always done through killing, right? Where is it? Generally speaking, genocide does not necessarily mean the immediate destruction of a nation, except when accomplished by mass killings. Here, the court is saying, no, it's about killing. Such methods of destruction include notably deprivation of food, medical care, shelter, or clothing, as well as lack of hygiene, systematic expulsion from homes, which sounds ethnic cleansing-y, or exhaustion as a result of excessive work or physical exertion. Some of these acts were indeed alleged by the parties in support of their respective claims, and those allegations will be examined by the court later in the judgment. The parties disagree, however, on whether forced displacement should be characterized as deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, in the sense of Article 2C of the Convention. They agree that the forced displacement of the population cannot constitute as such the actus reus of genocide, within the meaning of subparagraph C, Article 2 of the Convention. However, Croatia argues that forced displacement, accompanied by other acts listed in Article 2 of the Convention and coupled with an intent to destroy the group, is a genocidal act. For its part, Serbia maintains that neither the case law of the court nor the ICTY, so the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, has accepted that forced displacement can constitute genocide within the meaning of Article 2 of the Convention. So they both agreed in something that I already think is wrong. This idea that just removing someone from a place cannot be genocidal because a genocide requires killing. It really doesn't. To the point where one of the requirements of genocide is causing serious bodily or mental harm. Obviously, this doesn't mean killing. Obviously, people here are surviving. Right? Imposing measures intended to prevent births. No one needs to die here for genocide to be configured. So the idea that people need to die is, I think both Serbia and Croatia were wrong to begin with, and the court was wrong to begin with, right? But the court then says, okay, so the parties agree that just removing someone isn't genocidal, but Croatia says that removing someone with intent to destroy in the context of further acts can be genocidal. As the court recalls that in its 2007 judgment, it stated that neither the intent as a matter of policy to render an area ethnically homogeneous, nor the operations that may be carried out to implement such policy can as such be designated as genocide. The intent that characterizes genocide is to destroy in whole or in part a particular group, and deportation or displacement of the members of a group, even if effected by force, is not necessarily equivalent to destruction of that group, nor is such destruction an automatic consequence of the displacement. So the general idea is, if you think about it in this way, right? If the Madagascar plan had been implemented during Nazi Germany during World War II, according to this ruling, that would not be genocidal. That would just be ethnic cleansing, right? The idea that the destruction of the group needs to be the physical, biological destruction of the group sort of goes against what Lemkin was saying and is like a very narrow reading of the definition of genocide, of the Genocide Convention. So it's let's put it this way: it's a weird argument to make when what you want is to reflect what Lemkin was saying. But it is the ICJ, and so this is what we're working with, right? So it explained, however, so it continues the court, this is not to say that acts described as ethnic cleansing may never constitute genocide, if they are such as to be characterized as, for example, deliberately inflicted on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, contrary to Article 2, Paragraph C of the Convention, provided such actions is carried out with the necessary specific intent, dolus specialis, that is to say, with a view to the destruction of the group as is distinct from its removal from the region. Me, personally, this is my lege lata, okay? This is how the law as I see it, not the law as it is right now. I see this as a fundamental problem. I see this as a fundamental mistake that the court makes. Destruction does not refer exclusively to death in the Genocide Convention. That's my take. Destruction does not mean death. Because if destruction means death, then if you are successful in imposing measures intended to prevent births, and no one can have a child, which means that in 20 years, the group just sort of vanishes, right? And you transfer every single children that remains there. If that is how you conduct your genocide, you cannot really say, well, it's not really a genocide because the children that we transferred still exist somewhere else. So we transferred them, so the transferring of the children means that they're still alive, and therefore it can't be genocide, because for it to be genocide, you need to actually want to, kill them, and transfer doesn't kill. So the group has not been destroyed because the children that you transferred are still alive somewhere else. That just doesn't make any logical sense to me. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a mistake that the court makes in its separation of ethnic cleansing and genocide. Okay, but like stay with me, okay? Again, this is my lex lata. This is my lex ferenda. This is the law as I want it to be, not as the court decided it. The court might clarify this and I have a way that I'll tell you later on how I think I can homogenize this problem. So Magic says, did you see Piers Morgan saying he didn't believe this was genocide but ethnic cleansing when he interviewed Owen Jones? Yeah, but that is the typical kind of cop-out. I did see that interview. That is the typical kind of cop-out of saying it's not genocide, it's just ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing is a behavior. It's a set of behaviors. It's the attempt to remove people from a specific territory to create an ethnically homogeneous territory. That does not really typify, it does not really tell you what crime is being committed when you say ethnic cleansing. Right? When someone says, I believe this is ethnic cleansing, the immediate question you should retort with them is say, okay, it's ethnic cleansing. We agree that ethnic cleansing is illegal, right? Why is it illegal though? Is it illegal because it is a war crime? Is it illegal because it is a crime against humanity? Or is it illegal because it's genocide? It can be all three. Because ethnic cleansing is like saying taking someone's life. Taking someone's life is not necessarily illegal. You can take someone's life in self-defense and it would be legal. But we accept that there's a set of behaviors there that can be criminalized when you take someone's life. But you need to typify it. You need to tell me if it's manslaughter or if it's assassination or homicide or qualified homicide. Aggravated homicide, sorry. So whenever someone says, no, this is just ethnic cleansing, okay, but why is it ethnic cleansing? What is the objective of the ethnic cleansing? And if the objective of the ethnic cleansing is to subject the population to conditions of life calculated to bring about their destruction with intent to destroy them, then that ethnic cleansing would be genocidal. And I'll get to when I think ethnic cleansings are genocidal. So the court continues and says, in other words, whether a particular operation described as ethnic cleansing amounts to genocide depends on the presence or absence of acts listed in Article 2 of the Genocide Convention and on the intent to destroy the group as such. In fact, in the context of the convention, the term ethnic cleansing has no legal significance of its own. They even add like quote-unquote ethnic cleansing. This is what I mean when I say that ethnic cleansing is not really a crime. Ethnic cleansing is just a set of behaviors. So the immediate question that I would make Piers Morgan if he says this is just ethnic cleansing, I would say, okay, ethnic cleansing as what? What is the overall intent of Israelis when they are engaging in ethnic cleansing? Is it to violate the laws of war? Or is it to destroy Palestinians as a group? And if so, then that's genocide. Right? So let me continue. In fact, in the context of the convention, the term ethnic cleansing has no legal significance of its own. That said, it is clear that acts of ethnic cleansing may occur in parallel to acts prohibited by Article 2 of the convention and may be significant as indicative of the presence of a specific intent inspiring those acts. So for the court, ethnic cleansing leads to evidence of intent. The fact that you are engaging in ethnic cleansing can mean that your intention is to destroy the group, and can be part of a larger policy that is genocidal. Me personally, I think this is the wrong way of approaching this. Right? I don't agree, but it is the law as it is, right? So my contention here would be, okay, working with what the court is giving me, which is not what I agree with, right? Working with what the court is giving me, if ethnic cleansing is only genocidal when it is conducted in the course of a broader genocidal policy, you get the kind of situation that you got in Srebrenica. They said, look, trying to create a Serbian Serbia isn't genocidal, even if it subjects Croatians to conditions of life that make it impossible for Croatians to exist as a group in Serbia or in Greater Serbia, right? So what happened in that moment then is that these Serbians got frustrated, ethnically Serbians, right? They got frustrated. And in one instance, the way in which they wanted to achieve that ethnic cleansing, the way in which they wanted to create that ethnically homogeneous Serbia became genocide. How? Because they wanted to, they were the frustrated ethnic cleansers that Shebas talks about, and they got frustrated, and so they said, we need to do this faster. So they grabbed 8,000 Muslim Bosnians, and they killed them in the town of Srebrenica. Now that would be genocide, says the court, because there you have the intent to destroy the group as such, because you wanted to get rid of all Serbians from Serbia, from Greater Serbia, and so you killed them. And then the genocide is triggered. I don't agree. I think that was a mistake that the court made. I think the entire operation is genocidal. Srebrenica is just one element within that broader genocide. I don't understand why it would be, why we would be treating destruction of the group in the Genocide Convention as exclusively biological killing, when Lemkin himself said that that's not the case, and when the definition in the Genocide Convention doesn't really prohibit us from doing so. So why are we reading genocide so narrowly so as to create this separation with ethnic cleansing, right? I don't agree. I don't understand. But I guess my view on when these ethnic cleansings, this set of behaviors, become genocidal, and you can, let's say, make the distinction with like mass deportations or policies like if you start, I don't know, you start taxing people, you start taxing billionaires, and the billionaires like feel like they can no longer live in the UK, and so they leave. You are not subjecting that population to conditions of life subject to the destruction of the group, right? With the intent to destroy them. Right? So you're not genociding billionaires. So the way to distinguish between these mass expulsions or like mass deportations, sorry, and genocidal ethnic cleansings, working with what the court is giving me here, right, would be that international law needs to be seen through the lens of colonialism. And this is why Francesca Albanese's work is so important. Her latest report talks about this, talks about the logic of elimination and the logic of replacement as both functions of genocidal policy understood as colonial genocide. Right? This is the key for me. The colonial aspect of the relationship between Israel and Palestine is what determines that the kind of ethnic cleansing that is being carried out here in this video, in the what do you call it, in the Channel 4 snippet that we just saw, the fact that this is about colonialism, about taking over the land to replace the population with settler colonialists, that's what makes that ethnic cleansing to me genocidal. Even working with what the court is giving me here, because that ethnic cleansing is not happening just as ethnic cleansing. The court tells us just the mere removal of people isn't genocide, right? Okay, but in this case, it's not just the mere removal of people. There's no functionaire, there's no public official going to a Palestinian's home and saying, please leave, and like if you don't leave, we will bring the police in 2 days because like I don't know, we need to construct a highway through your house. That's not what happening here. That no one is saying, oh, your visa expired, can you please leave? No, there is a set of behaviors of deportations, of checkpoints, of congressmen and politicians talking about annexing the land, of actual annexations of East Jerusalem, in which these settlers position themselves. Right? That is a colonial mindset. That means that this specific kind of ethnic cleansing is at heightened risk of genocide. For me, I think in legal jargon, I would say there's a risk of genocide in the West Bank that, if we're honest, if we look at the law with the same, let's say, lack of trust of Israeli institutions as we do in Gaza, then yeah, there's one single genocide happening against Palestinians in Palestine. Does this mean that the entire settler program has always been genocidal? No. Like the show, like the news segment actually also said, there was a time when these settlers would flee the police. So there is a a segment of ethnic cleansing where you could make that differentiation, again, working with what the court is giving me and say, no, this is an attempt to just try to make an Jewishly homogeneous West Bank, right? And again, this is not something I agree with, but like, it's what the court is giving me. But ever since, there's an alliance of the state and these colonial settlers, then yes, you can argue, even within the context of the Genocide Convention itself, that what is happening here is more than just the attempt to create an ethnically homogeneous Israel-Palestine, because it's not even Israel, it's like a greater Israel. So I think even with what the court is giving me, you can see what's happening in the West Bank right now as simply another face of another facet of a broader genocide. This is my line of differentiation between what the court would call only ethnic cleansing and genocide would be, is it a colonial ethnic cleansing? Is it meant to create this kind of disassembling of the national pattern of a group, like the destruction of the national pattern of the oppressed group, the other, the imposition of the national pattern of the oppressor? Is that what you're doing? If that's what you're doing, then the chances that this is a genocide increase exponentially to me. But that's my take. That's how I read the difference between ethnic cleansing and genocide. Are all ethnic cleansings genocide? No, right? But are colonial ethnic cleansings genocide? Most likely, for me, most likely. Particularly the settler colonial policies. And this is important because it's not just about Israel, right? This is a typical argument of like, oh, you're just singling out Israel. This is not just about Israel. If this kind of ethnic cleansing isn't genocidal ever, then again, you're telling me that the Wild West with the cowboys and the Native Americans, that's not genocidal, because it was simply ethnic cleansing, quote unquote, simply. The Trail of Tears was not a genocide because the indigenous population simply continued to exist in another geographical area. Is that really what you're telling me? The Trail of Tears was not a genocidal policy because the people survived. So if that's how we want to approach ethnic cleansing, then a lot of things that we consider genocide, even Lemkin considered the colonization of the Americas as genocidal, then aren't genocide. And I just find that unthinkable, right? Again, you would be telling me that the Madagascar plan was not a genocidal policy. No, and I'm not saying this because, every single mass deportation program is genocidal. No. But mass deportations in the context of a colonial project that has racialized a specific minority and is discriminating against it to create a pure society, quote unquote pure, that has to be genocidal, right? The Argentinian conquest of the desert, the Chilean pacification of the Araucanía, the Peruvian incursions into the Amazon, the Brazilian occupation of the Amazon, the U.S. Great March West, the Trail of Tears, all of these policies are genocides. We talk about them as genocide. But if just ethnic cleansing is not genocidal, then so much of these like settler colonial histories that we understand, we process as individuals, we process them as genocides, all of a sudden would not have been genocides. All because we needed to protect what the Allies did to ethnic Germans in Poland and Czech Republic after World War II, where they transferred large populations of Germans to Germany, which was an injustice, right? Honestly, the people who were transferred out of Poland and Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia to Germany should have a right to return to where they live now. They should be compensated individually by the Allies. So but in the attempt to say no, what we did cannot be genocide, we ended up creating these like complicated situations of definitions of narrowing and nuancing terms, making it very difficult to achieve accountability in cases like Israel-Palestine. So again, it's not really about Israel. It's not that Israel is a demonic state or anything, like not at all. Israel is engaging in a set of behaviors that fit the bill of settler colonial genocide. It fits, right? And so applying the same standard that we have applied to everyone, when you have this kind of colonial ethnic cleansing, we sort of need to be able to call that genocide, because otherwise then again the Trail of Tears is not a genocidal policy. I just can't accept that. I can't accept that only when a group of cowboys went into a Native American village and killed every single member, only then is genocide. But the Trail of Tears, that wasn't genocidal. That was just an effort to create an ethnically homogenous Western white United States. That's not genocidal. The indigenous people continued to live just somewhere else. Transfer of populations cannot be genocide. I just can't accept that. Right? But the ICJ put us in this problem because, I mean, do we really want to say that this is genocide? And I think they should have. I think they should have been brave enough to say, yes, the effort to create an ethnically homogeneous country through the destruction of the ability of a people to live in that territory is genocidal. They should have been able to say that. They should have been brave enough to say that. They didn't, and they created a lot of problems for us. But the only way I find consistency in what they said, so that we can say that, okay, mass deportations, not genocidal, but what Serbia did, genocidal, at least for me, is to frame international law through a colonial lens, through a post-colonial lens, and validate the experiences of colonialism and colonial thinking in international law. And when we do that, it sort of makes more sense. Things sort of fall into place. That's my view of this. And this is why I think understanding international law through the lens of post-colonialism and through the lens of coloniality is the next big step in how we understand international law. So we've had traditional international law, sucked. We've had the new economic order international law, very economically focused international law, Marxist approaches to international law. We've had all of this in the past. We've had TWAIL as well, critical legal studies applied to international law. But the next big thing for international law to make sense, to make better sense in a post-colonial world, is to read it through a post-colonial lens. That's the thing. That's the key for me. And when you read what the court said through a post-colonial lens, this jumbled, nuanced definition between ethnic cleansing and genocide becomes clearer. All right, so I just wanted to read this to you guys. This is the Max Planck Encyclopedia of International Law. It's a very famous encyclopedia of international law, and it says here, while ethnic cleansing adversely affects people, what is really at stake, contrary to genocide, is territory rather than the physical biological destruction of an ethnic, racial, or religious group, which honestly frustrates me so much because this is exactly the opposite of what Raphael Lemkin wanted to create with genocide. But okay. The primary consideration underlying ethnic cleansing is the establishment of ethnically homogeneous lands. This may be achieved by any number of methods, ultimately even genocide. In this regard, ethnic cleansing may be a portent to genocide to come. In Kristich, the ICTY found that a plan to ethnically cleanse the Srebrenica enclave of Muslims escalated into a genocidal plan designed to guarantee that the Bosnian Muslim population would be permanently eradicated. As it has been aptly put by Shebas, genocide may be the last resort of the frustrated ethnic cleanser. This is the lex lata, right? This is the law as it is. I think the law as it is wrong, but I think the law, but I don't need to change the law as it is to the law as I would want it to be to fix this problem. I think even within the confines of the narrow view of the court, you can conclude that ethnic cleansing can be genocidal in colonial contexts. Rosova says it concerns territory, not people. Oh, does it? Yeah, it's not a very good separator, Yeah. So let me see if there's anything else worth mentioning here. Oh, this is interesting. So the in the ICC, in Prosecutor V. al-Bashir, so the president of Sudan, the ICC held that the practice of ethnic cleansing may result in genocide if it brings about the commission of the objective elements of genocide provided in the Rome Statute, with the specific intent to destroy in whole or in part the targeted group. The ICJ also confirmed that ethnic cleansing may potentially amount to genocide, that acts of ethnic cleansing may occur in parallel to acts prohibited by Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, and that acts of ethnic cleansing may be significant as indicative of the presence of a specific intent, dolus specialis, inspiring those acts. As an example, yeah, this is what we just read, right? So I like the al-Bashir argument of saying like, hey, are all ethnic cleansings genocidal? No. But if you can find that the actor that is committing ethnic cleansing has intent to destroy, and this ethnic cleansing is being carried out through methods of conditions of life that are calculated to bring about that destruction, then that is genocidal. That is going back to a definition of the Genocide Convention as it was regulated here, right? The inflicting on the group of conditions of life calculated to bring about its destruction. This should and can mean ethnic cleansing. That's what the Bashir ruling says. Jartov says war criminals that transfer into occupied territory don't have a right to that territory after the occupation ends. Criminals lose rights as punishment for their crimes. Why not so for the invaders in Poland post-World War II? I'm not sure I follow. Can you elaborate? Rosova says, oh, you just ripped people from their ancestral lands, their culture, their memories, their means of subsistence. You killed a whole bunch of them. Many of them won't even recover, etc. Yeah, it's cool, not genocidal. Unga bunga ICJ probably. Yeah, so that is my problem. My problem with that, if I read the Genocide Convention and I read the definition of ethnic cleansing in the same way that the ICJ did, you could end up arguing, you're not forced to, but you could end up arguing that a lot of like genocidal policies that we understand as genocides are not really genocide. And I just can't accept that. Whereas I think that you can read this text as incorporating a broader reading if only you just accept the context, the colonial context in which some ethnic cleansing policies occur. If you do that, then it'll work out. If you do that, it'll work out. If you do that, like you will be able to salvage what the court just did. Jarto says, it sounded like you said the removal of German settlers in Poland was a war crime. So that's an interesting question. Not necessarily a war crime because the war had ended, but it could be a human rights violation. Like it could be a violation of the right to property. It could be a violation of private life. It could be a violation of the right to a national a life project. So what I said is that it was an injustice, right? So because these were not German settlers, these were like people who lived in Czechoslovakia, who lived in Poland for a long time. It's just that the Allies wanted Germans to live in Germany and Polish people to live in Poland. So it was an injustice. Rosova says there weren't the only settlers, though. Allies removed whole of Prussia, entirety of Germany moved westward. Yes, exactly. So yeah. So it's not that the Nazis have moved German people to live in Poland. It's that there were ethnic Germans living in Poland. Just like there's like ethnic Germans living in Peru right now in the town of like Posuso. And so they were Polish citizens, but of ethnic German ancestry. And they were moved to Germany because Germans should live in Germany. That, to me, that is potentially a crime against humanity, definitely a human rights violation. So I do think these people need compensation from the Allies. I don't think this justifies in any way what's happening in Palestine or should drive us to believe that, oh no, then we need to narrow down the definition of genocide so that that can be legal. I think this is what has brought so much problems to the Genocide Convention. Every time a state conducts any kind of eliminationist policy, then the immediate reaction of the international community is, oh no, that can't be genocidal, right? Assimilation of indigenous people into Western ways of thinking and ways of living should not be genocidal because everyone is doing it, so it can't be genocidal. Jim Crow can't be genocidal because the United States is doing it, so it's not genocidal. Apartheid can't be genocidal because, I mean, if we say that it's genocidal, then maybe the United States might end up being genocidal, so it can't be genocidal. So every time a state does something that is genocidal, the international community rallies behind that and says, no, that let's Let's hedge that. Let's chip that off from the definition of genocide. Let's make it so that the definition of genocide makes sure that Serbia did not commit genocide, that the United States did not commit genocide, that South Africa did not commit genocide. They committed something else. They committed Jim Crow, they committed ethnic cleansing, they committed apartheid, they committed something else. And you chip, and then when something happens, you end up with this problem of like, now, no, Israel is not committing genocide. If Israel is Israel is launching a war against Hamas, and this is all just regrettable collateral damage, right? So it's always like that. It's always like that. And this is the problem with the Genocide Convention, the way we frame genocide. So yeah, for me, that needs to end, that needs to stop, and hopefully the court will be brave enough to do that in the genocide case against Israel. Because I think it is perfectly possible to apply this kind of rationality to the plan to deport every single Palestinian from Gaza. Right? The Trump plan is genocidal, not because mass deportations are genocidal, but because these mass deportations are happening in a colonial context with intent to destroy. Right? Okay, guys, it's 7:02. Time for dinner.